Thank you for tuning in, if that's the term for a webcast or a webinar. We're going to take up probably around 45 minutes and then questions and answers to talk to you about the TECHNIA CATIA V5 PLM Launchpad. So this is how the agenda looks for this session. We're going to do a bit of an introduction and a scene setting, which will be as minimalist as possible in terms of PowerPoint and that sort of thing, but it's important just to give a little bit of background. And then Peter will drive the system in all its glory and show some very CATIA focused functionality here. So the intention of this session is, as trailed, is very much to show essentially how CATIA V5 could be said to have evolved. There are triggers to evolution in nature, and I don't think it's too much of a leap to say that the 3D experience platform is the equivalent of that in the PLM world. But if you'll forgive me, I'll talk about that in a minute. So we'll then obviously do a recap, and I'll give you just a bit of a preview of the upcoming webinars. That this first episode is part of a series of 4 at the moment, which could be extended. So a bit of a mini series there. And if you don't mind, we'll do questions at the end. The time between Peter's live demo and that Q&A isn't very long, but we're recording this session, and I think that might be more sensible in terms of those that need to view the session later. So just to introduce the Launchpad and just make clear exactly what it is. So the 3D experience platform is a very comprehensive product development system, and it is the heart of this offering, but that's not all there is to it. The problem with this is that obviously it's a very complicated product behind the scenes, or at least it appears as such, and hopefully we're going to demystify that. So what we're finding is that there's some barriers to adoption, some of which are complexity, but others are cost and things like that. So we thought, why don't we bring our award-winning team of technical and commercial and other specialists and get our combined brain power together to understand and put together a package that gets customers started as fast as possible at minimum cost and frankly with the minimum hassle. We are the largest provider of services for training in the UK and beyond, and TECHNIA as a whole is Dassault's #1 partner. So we're pretty well qualified in this area. We're platinum partners, and we run what we like to think is a flexible help desk. I think customers value the way that we can adapt to their needs in terms of whether it's a bit of question and answer, a bit of training, or whatever through that help desk service. So putting all that together into a cost-effective, ready-to-go, all-inclusive bundle made some sense. And that, in essence, is what the Launchpad is. It's everything needed, both in terms of software and the services to get going. So why now? Well, firstly, quality. We use the 3D experience platform ourselves in TECHNIA, and I'm sure many people attending this will know our history of growing out of an automotive engineering company, Integral Powertrain, who are still a customer, and we still support. So our technical team, we have an engineering business, part of TECHNIA, use the 3D experience platform every day. So we know what that tool set is like. And our view is, now we've been using the cloud for a few years, that it really is worth looking at for all of our customers. What's made it even more attractive is that CAD integrations recently have all been completely re-engineered. So SOLIDWORKS, CATIA V5, NX, Autodesk Inventor, Altium, that's the PCB design. All of these use a new technology, which new technology for connectivity via the internet, which makes these integrations a lot faster, more secure, and they've also supplemented that sort of pretty dull. The integrations don't sound very exciting, but if you supplement it with some other technology that gets the best out of it, then all of a sudden it's starting to look quite capable. And for that sort of thing, we're talking the 3D viewer technology, the ability to drill down through product structures, all through a web browser with no installation, on a phone or on a tablet, or on, of course, your laptop or desktop. So putting all of that good, those good products together, and our experience over the last 10 years, both in the UK and for the last 25 years in the group, in terms of deploying these products, not just the new integrations, but the background apps as well. I think we're in a pretty good position from a quality point of view. If you then think of value, and a lot of our customers are small to medium-sized companies, obviously that's another key driver. And what's changed recently is that Dassault have revisited both the packaging and the pricing of these products. I don't think it's any coincidence that this is timed with the arrival of these new CAD integrations and with the ongoing growth of the cloud platform. So again, I could imagine some people might be looking at this thinking, oh yeah, okay, it's more money and all this sort of thing. I'd just hold that thought if you bear with me on that, because I think that if you can get past that view, there's a lot of very good value services and functionality within the package. And when it comes to pricing, just to put this into perspective, for the very basic core functionality for managing CATIA V5 data and getting all the cloud platforms, we're talking the cost of these products is not much more than a decent mobile phone contract on a rental per month. So it's surprisingly affordable, especially when you see what it can do. So as far as the core offerings are concerned, just in terms of what it looks like in terms of products, the PLM Launchpad, what I've actually called the Team PLM Launchpad for the later sessions, is the platform itself. This is what the average user who perhaps doesn't have CAD would do. So it's everything. It's collaborating on things like document management and markup of drawings or 3D models, project management. There's a very comprehensive project management app in there. This is all in the core product, with the exception of the EBOM editor, which is on the list there, but everything else is all in this base level product we're talking about today. The key thing today we're talking about is the CATIA V5 integration. So both the integration and the Launchpad apps I've just mentioned, all of this comes in the same package that we're going to look at. So we're not going to focus heavily on the right-hand side of the screen today. That's in session 3. We will touch on it. Peter will show some of that, but the explanation and the background to it, we're going to save that for session 3. Session 2, we're going to cover after today's, will be about the SOLIDWORKS integration, and that's going to be quite a similar session to today's. So we're going to get those. That's where our core business is the CAD integrations and so forth. But obviously, the whole idea of this is once you've got your CAD data into a platform or PLM system, for want of a better word, it's about getting more value out of that data. You've spent a lot of time creating these models. Wouldn't it be great if purchasing could get a step file without actually talking to somebody in engineering, which inevitably requires time and effort? So if those things can be created at the time of release or check-in by the engineer, then they're available for authorized users to get them later. So there's another element which I did briefly mention, which was the CAD integrations beyond CATIA V5 and SOLIDWORKS. We're not going to focus on those for now, but they are there. Again, more detail. I'm not going to go into all of the detail on here, but in a nutshell, the Launchpad comes in different levels depending on customer need. So the standard is intended to get you up and running quickly with one-to-one fast start training via the web. So just like we're doing now, essentially. There'll also be some self-service media for you to learn with, videos and so forth. And a help desk contract to get you going quickly. So methodologies that we've developed as well that hopefully will give some extra power to your elbow. And then it goes up from there right the way up to essentially tailor-made to whatever it is you like. But it's all basically built around the support contract, largely is funding the deployment services as well. So it's pretty good value offer in those terms. So as far as what the actual 3D experience platform on cloud is, I think it's important to just take a second. So I never like to assume that people know anything about this. So I've developed what I think is a pretty straightforward and quick way of presenting this to people, which hopefully you'll agree. So in a nutshell, you have a database PLM system either installed on-premise. That's if you were a customer installing that inside your own company, that's the traditional way of doing this. But in our case, we're talking about something that's installed on cloud. In essence, that means that Dassault have a huge server room and they have the system and systems installed there and they run it for you, and it's connected to the internet. You connect to the internet, you're connected to the system with all the requisite security that you'd expect from like a banking app or from Amazon or something like that. The 3D experience platform then has apps like CATIA, Delmia, Simulia hardwired into it. We're not talking about those apps today. That's not the focus of this session, but just to explain why Dassault did that, because it's relevant in a second. By getting all of these apps on the same platform, plugged in, hardwired in, they're able to share their data model, they're able to share information more effectively. So that's sort of trying to show that your CATIA data, once it's shared on the platform, this, for instance, the 3D shapes, the lightweight representations, can be used all the way through Innovia for non-CAD viewing, clash, markup, all that sort of stuff. The same 3D shapes you do in CATIA can be used in Delmia for factory layout, machining, work instructions. And likewise, the models can be used in Simulia apps, that's Abacus related apps for simulation, CFD, and so forth. So that was the concept behind it. And that has been quite successful. Lots of customers using that. In the past, things like CATIA V5, SOLIDWORKS, ECAD products, and others like Autodesk products and so forth were all sort of a little bit outside the circle of trust, should we say. So they had a gateway in through what is called these open connectors, but it wasn't very, it wasn't as good as being actually within the platform like those other products, core products are. So what Dassault did a couple of years ago was this. They rewrote all of the integrations. And so these products are now inside the circle of trust, if that makes sense. So in essence, when you save your CATIA V5 data into the platform, as far as you're concerned in CATIA V5, you're just using CATIA V5 and you've got some nice new bells and whistles, that's great. But once it's in the platform, it's stored in the same structure as it would have been if it had been created in CATIA V6 or CATIA native, as we call it. So almost all of the capability that native CATIA would have in the platform beyond is open, and the same applies to SOLIDWORKS. So that's one of the big enablers to make all this happen. Final bit of clarification. before we get on to the live demonstration. How do you get into, or how does the platform appear to end users? There's three ways. So if you're using a native app, like at the top, then you're already plugged in and you've got all of the functions built in, and that's the way it's always been designed. So that's all well and good, but the new integrations bring a lot of that capability that the native apps have into CATIA V5 or SOLIDWORKS. So as you can see by these screens on the left, we've got these new windows that you wouldn't have seen in CATIA or SOLIDWORKS before. So effectively, these are your window to the platform, and this is the bridge between CATIA V5 and the 3D Experience platform, which you'll see shortly. So embedded Windows, full native, and then the final way is through web apps. So this is essentially opening a web browser and clicking on one of the apps in the 3D Experience platform and using whichever one. So we've got project management at the top and the project manager view in the middle, and you've got the product explorer at the bottom, which Pete's going to show a bit later on. There is another option. These are these mobile apps. These are specific apps to use on a phone or something. They're not really necessary now, to be honest, because phones are so capable. You can just use the web browsers. But you need a decent phone or a decent tablet, but it's there, it works. So just to finalize then and just frame what we're talking about today, if this is a view of a typical company, and let's not forget our customers, you can see all those different departments in a company. You could argue, if you were to color those departments by usage or potential usage of these PLM related apps. So let's imagine outside of the design and development office, how much could other departments use 3D representations, product structures, some of the information that goes on drawings, some of the notes about process get used in planning or production engineering. If more of that could be tied into the platform and more of these departments could get access to that source data without having to buy a CATIA license, that's got to be a good thing. And that's the crux of what we're talking about. So today's session is going to focus really on the front end of this. Today's CATIA V5, next week will be SOLIDWORKS. Then we're going to look at the wider enterprise that's the rest of this diagram. So I think that's my few minutes of scene setting. From this point on, I'm going to hand over to Peter, who's going to be looking at, that's the sort of view of what you're going to see. And that's a brief overview of the sort of stuff we're going through. So Peter, in those inimitable words, it's over to you.
So, after talking about it, let's have a look at what this platform looks like. So the first thing you'll notice is you're under a web browser like we saw, and usual things we're all familiar with: username, password, and you log in. You'll notice even though I'm going to be showing V5, you still start in the platform dashboard. If you will then, I'll show you your launch V5 from there, and that's how it connects to the platform that way. So in the background, I've already installed an integration on my V5. But if you see it basically happening on this web page here, you don't actually need CATIA V5 to do it. So for example, I can look through a CAD structure as someone who doesn't have any CAD license, just a normal login license, and they can look around the CAD and do all those nice things you want to be able to do that you usually have to pester the designer to do, like take sections. And if I can get rid of that, there we go. Take measurements against whatever you want to take a measurement for. Etc. And just view where parts are and where they are in situ with one another, looking at a whole tree. Now this is just remembered it from last time. There is a search which we'll go into about how you find all your data. But if you actually want to use CATIA V5, you'll notice on this there's a compass here. And if I tidy away that, just my favorites, you have your apps. And there's SOLIDWORKS, which I'll be using next week. And there is V5, which I could click on now to launch it, but I want to show us a few more things here first before we get there. So first of all, as a normal user, you can see the tree here. We can also see properties about it, what state it's in, what it's called, usual things. The change process associated with it, if there is one, which there isn't one yet. A few bits of download. You can upload documents directly against the CAD if you wish. You just drag and drop it off your desktop or off the search. And there is a system, what's called derived outputs, which exists against the parts themselves. So if I look at hasn't had them generated, we'll see how they get generated later on, where you can make step files, PDFs, etc., so the people can just download them without having to worry, basically having to annoy the CAD designer and poke them and say, can I just get you to drop everything you're doing, open this other part and make a PDF or make a step, please? And there's also, very usefully, the Relation Explorer, which can show you what parts are dependent on what. So you've got parents and children, but also sideways links. So if you have a part that uses geometry of another part, because they're designed to fit together, usual reason, then you can see that in a way that a file-based folder system on SubNASBox from network share won't tell you. Just as it won't tell you, if you look at a part, it won't tell you where it's used. This will, it just does it. Because it's database, it knows everything. So I could open, right click on one of these and say open with V5 if I wanted to here. That's a bit boring. What I can do instead though, just to show you a bit more of the power of this, is if I just select a number of different parts like this. And then right click and then open with V5. So V5 is going to open now. And it's opening on my other screen because I'm using multiple screens, so apologies for that. And it's going to open just what I've asked it to. And then I'll show you around the integration how things work inside V5 once it's done that. So just downloading that. There we go. There is my partially loaded assembly. And if you look at the tree, you can still see it knows there are parts that aren't represented, and they're just grayed out, as it were. So we can still work on an assembly with not everything visible, which is a really, really useful thing to do if you have very large assemblies, because sometimes it's just too much for your computer to handle, or it's just too much clutter. But also, the way you can just grab a box like this means you can grab things and not really care which assemblies they're in or which sub-assemblies, so you just grab the bits around that area and away you go. So looking back at that then, but we are now in V5. And now that I've opened things in V5, I can actually stay in here and do pretty much everything I want to do. So I've got the open button. Give me a second. And that brings up a search, so it's in the other window, which is the full text search as before. And I can show it here. You can show all the different tags and ways of finding the data you want in order to just open it, or if you want to, you can use this viewer and look through each one. Tells you about the properties here as well. So without having to download anything or download much, because it uses lightweight viewer files, you can look at the parts in question and see if you're actually opening what you think you want to open. So that's opening, just had preview and assembly there, and it's obviously come up with the whole thing. So that's actually the assembly that I've already got partially opened. So if I now attempt to open that fully, that will open over the top of it and add every other part to the session that I need. So I can add the parts I need as and when I need them. So that's everything. So now, when you're inside CATIA V5 like this, as far as modeling is concerned and doing day-to-day work, you do the same thing you always did. So no need to retrain anyone. No need to do special ways of working. You just do CATIA V5, and it's just so you have this extra menu here that has reserve and unreserve, which I'll explain just a second, and a bit of revision management, and this new save, these save and save with options here, where you, instead of saving locally, you still do that, but then you save it up to the platform so that everyone else gets an up-to-date version of it. And it controls what you are looking at and what you can do to what. So the classic problem, well, there's two classic problems in the file-based V5 world, which are, if you're working on the same assembly as someone else, whoever presses save last wins and can potentially override whatever else anyone else has done in that same assembly, which is pretty awful and pretty frustrating. So to solve that, they have a system where you say reserve and unreserve, and you can see it here if I zoom that in a bit, make it a bit bigger. These green keys and red padlocks, where green keys are stuff I've reserved, reservation over me, and the red padlocks are what someone else has reserved, which has got some other username there, which means I can work on that and be safe in the knowledge no one else is going to save over it. They can open it, they can look at it, they can move it around their assemblies, can't save changes to it directly. Likewise, I've opened this part very much in my assembly. I can move it around, but I can't save changes to that because it's not mine to touch. Similarly, you'll find parts in the tree which will be not marked as frozen and released. These standard parts will obviously be released. And that means you won't be able to modify them either. And this gets me to the second problem which file-based always has, where you have a part that gets revised and revised and revised. Revision 4, say. And if you ever want to look at what revision 1 looked like, you just have the PDF you happen to export off the drawing at that time. And that's all you've got. And that's not great. What you want to do is go back to the old revision, surely. And this is where we get back to the PLM style, PLM tools, as it were, where every part has its own life cycle, which goes through these, well, there's 5 states, but generally it's the middle 3 that concern 99% of what goes on. And it's very, very easy to understand. You tell someone a part is in work, they know what you're talking about. You tell someone a part is frozen, and it means it's in the pre-release state, ready to be, it's being checked, it hasn't been released yet. And if you tell someone it's released, well, it's released. And if I drag in something from my V5 session, because I can just do this, I literally just dragged that part from there like that, I can look at also its revision history. So revision A will obviously be released, and revision B is still in work. And I can look at its properties here. I can even edit them here if I want to, and they can synchronize up and down from CATIA. So if you write things in the description, CATIA obviously pulls it up here. And you got the thumbnail view there. And also the same change thing we saw earlier. So that is, in a nutshell, basic life cycle. But one of the problems I've heard people talk about an awful lot, especially now when a lot of us are working from home still, and will be for some time, is our good friend drawing checking. We like to track, well, we like to check drawings. A lot of people I tend to find will do it by printing out the drawing, getting their nice highlighter and highlighting all over it, and then handing it back to the designer. And that obviously doesn't really work that well right now. So instead, they've got this thing called 3D markup. I'll call it 3D markup, even though I'm showing you 2D, and I'll show you why in a bit, where you can take a drawing or a 3D shape, say, I want a new markup, give it a new markup. Wait for this to finish making. And I'm going to be able to just do markups in a way that other people can then view on their own afterwards. So I can go to this drawing and I have a number of tools here to say, well, I like this. Put a big red ring here. Let's put a bit of text on that saying, and obviously go through the entire document, telling the person who drew it what I think of them. I mean, what they should do to fix it. And obviously, you can see that the text zooms nicely because it's not just part of the image. And then I can save that back. And there's even, just to give you a little taster of a later session, where you can generate issues and change actions directly against these markups. So someone can be going through, spotting problems and go, hello, doodle on what the problem is and say, I want to turn that into an issue. No problem with that. And on that note as well, let's just show you what it looks like in 3D. Drag that in there, dragging it from my V5 session again. Incidentally, you can drag the other way. There's a perfect good 3D view. And I'm going to add myself a new markup as before. And again, I can put a circle there. You see it's a 3D circle that remains centered where I want it to center. And again, I can have text pointing to wherever I want to on the geometry and move that around. So I can point out whatever I want in 3D in a way that both anyone can, well, with and without V5, you can view. So if I just look at my things to talk about. So that is largely what I want to talk about for this first session. There is a questions function, by the way, if anyone has noticed that. I'm just going to pop out and see if anyone has there. So I've got a question here as well, which I'm going to just mention. Someone's asking if they've got how many processor cores can the design use. So this is sort of outside what the platform is really about, because it's more data management. But if you want an answer to that, it's more, V5 was designed at a time when fewer cores were available. So if you want to use all your cores, you probably do want to be going to the new CATIA native, which is a bit more designed around that. And that's all I can really talk about at this point without derailing the session quite heavily, because it's quite a deep subject. Anyone else wish to ask questions now? Now's a good time. Otherwise, I'll move on and show on possibly a bit more about the search whilst I was here, because I didn't show that fully. It's going to behave on me. There we go. There's our lovely search. And this, just to complete the story about how we find things, this search will find everything, and you can specify by what they call the 6W tags, content filtering, basically, where you want, what sort of thing you want to find, including what part of the CAD structure it lives in. So you have things like, to find me things that are, so find me all those parts that someone made and didn't actually put in any assembly anywhere. Okay, we'll go find those. There's quite a lot of results to filter there. There we go. And you can see they've got nice screenshots. I didn't have to do anything special to make these screenshots. It just makes them as they go along. And obviously, if you want a more normal database style view, we have this grid view, which shows a bit more information, but obviously doesn't show the preview unless you bring up the preview, which you may notice is familiar from the CATIA V5 interface. There's our part, nice and quick and easy. And of course, we can open it from here. And there's this quite nice relation explorer I hinted at before, which shows us in a fairly nice web view. It's a bit like Desk, but where everything is used. So that's probably a bad example. But it's definitely a bad example because I filtered it down on everything that wasn't being used in an assembly. Apologies for that. So just grab that part again, Data objects. And whilst that's loading, you just mentioned there's another question about any chance of doing a webinar on CNC mill turns. Well, we can certainly get back to you on that one. It won't be me doing it because I'm not a specialist on it, but if there's enough demand for it, we can certainly put one on. But anyway, back to Relation Explorer. This is this assembly, which we saw earlier, so it's this one. And you'll notice it's not only picking up the fact it's got children, but you'll notice it's got a document attached to it. It's got a drawing. It's attached to an interference simulation. It's in a folder. And it's attached to, let's say, in context of a bunch of issues here, which we can see. And a series of markups have also been registered against it. So you can mark up context. So we can see and we can explore in sometimes dizzying detail the web of entire assembly and everything it's connected to and everything those bits are connected to, in a way that lets you find out what's really going on with your data, because it's very, very opaque, I find, with file-based system. The classic problem being, of course, is that you get someone saying, I want to change this part to fix this problem in this assembly. You're like, great, go for change that part. Oh, it's stopped working on these other assemblies. And you go, well, why didn't you check that? I had no way of knowing it was used in those assemblies, because in file-based, it just does not tell you. You just kind of have to know. Whereas here, you can just drop that part in question into Relation Explorer and say, where are you used? And it goes, I'm used here, 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 and here, and I affect these things here. And this other part that uses geometry for me is also affected. You need to double check all of these things if you want to change me. So straight away, you get rid of a whole lot of stealth problems that creep up you sometimes many months later about your data, you're changing to data that you don't really realize the knock-on effects you might be having. So that, I think, brings me to the end of everything I wanted to show here. So now I'm just going to be answering questions for anyone who may have them. A few questions in so far, but if anyone else has any, now's a good time to type. And if you haven't noticed, there is a question field on the GoToWebinar interface, which you should all be able to use. Sorry?
Peter, maybe the good thing here would be to just run through the summary, and then if people are typing, I can conclude the summary and we can address them after that, maybe.
Yep. So if you want to steal back presenting.
Oh, yeah, I've got to try and do that, haven't I? How do I do that?
Here
we go.
I could do it there like that.
Here we go. Right. So that was trust me, that was the briefest of whistle-stop tours around what is possible. But the point that, as far as the CATIA V5 focus is concerned, is that the way it's all been designed is for CATIA V5 users to be able to spend most of their time in CATIA. So the pages from the platform that are most applicable, most useful to CATIA V5 users are available, as you can see on the screen. So search, the relations type explore functionality can be accessed from there. The tasks view, we didn't even look at that yet, because that's more of a thing for episode 3, where we look at the wider sort of PLM functionality. So, but the view of the idea of having a task list for end users visible in the CAD panel there, and such that those can be driven from projects. So you can mark a task as complete, 50% up to date, and that will roll up to the project manager to see progress. In no smoke and mirrors, that works. That's absolutely core functionality part of all of this. But as I said, that's a bit beyond the scope of today and the CATIA V5 focus. So I can understand some people might challenge, so what's this, the strap line about CATIA V5 evolving? And I'll defend that vigorously. And I mean, this assembly management, CATIA V5 file-based on its own is, it's a bit like having on some occasions, a bit like having a gun with no bullets. You've got all manner of powerful capability. I mean, the question earlier about multi-core processors and all that sort of stuff. We've got, there's a lot of capability in CATIA, but some of it you can't use. And I mean, the multi-core question is a good one, but albeit from a different angle, in so much as that's unfortunately one of the limitations of V5 is it's the way it's architected was before the days of multi-core processing as far as Windows is concerned. That said, there are other ways of getting hold of that through, and that's what the newer products are for. But in terms of the core functionality evolving, large assembly management in CATIA has only really been fully utilized or fully available if you've had some sort of connected data management system like VPM or something like that. And this, the only problem with VPM or its successors and others like Smart Team is they do all need servers, they need installation, they need administration, upgrades and so forth. All of that happens behind the scenes and part of the subscription fee. So things like the automatic generation of lightweight data for everyone in the team to make large assembly loading faster is an absolute gem. Because the way it works normally is it works on individual machines. There's no collective cache. Peter mentioned the Links and Relations Explorer. If you're working on files that have multi-model links, those links, yes, you can see them under Edit Links. You can see one level if you've got one part open. If you've got all the parts open, yes, you can see the links. But if you haven't got all the parts open, you can't see where they go. This sort of system makes that possible. You saw the preview. I mean, we've barely mentioned the access from anywhere team working. I mean, at the time like this that we're going through, the fact that you could all be sitting in an office using this system, and then the next day you all have to go and sit working at home or wherever on the road or an airport or something. So long as you've got an internet connection, you can collaborate as a team. And again, we didn't show it, but just that picture on the right there, that's a classic example of a, in quotes, CATIA V6 capability where you could color wash the geometry to show, you know, what was released, what was heavier than 5 kilos and less than 10 kilos, or who owned what, or what was the standard part. Color washing geometry, that is possible within the web view of your CATIA V5 data, all part of the standard base package. Then you add on top of that the fact that you can extend the access to other people. You can use the platform product structure app, native app, to construct assemblies with SOLIDWORKS and CATIA V5 data in the same assembly. That has some implications potentially for companies that might have 1 or 2 seats of CATIA V5 and want to go further, but think, do you know what, do we really need to spend that much money on some CATIA V5 seats? Well, would SOLIDWORKS be all right for some of these things? Well, that collaboration is already possible and it's only getting better. And the final point to mention is that, again, following up on the earlier question about multi-threading and CAM, you could do all your designs in CATIA V5, save them on the platform, but use the 3D Experience native CAM functionality for manufacturing, which is multi-threaded, uses all the latest bells and whistles, and is very latest IT architecture, and shall we say. Same applies for the finite element analysis, CFD, all of Dassault's effort is going in, most of their effort these days is going into anything related to the 3D Experience platform and the apps that are on that platform. So being able to tap into that ecosystem, even if you want to stay in the familiar tool set of CATIA V5 or SOLIDWORKS, I think is a useful step. So just to recap again, just finally about the Launchpad, you've seen the product tool set that this offering is designed to unlock and facilitate. If you already have existing CATIA V5 licenses, it's very cost effective to add cloud 3D Experience to it. There are new bundles which are priced differently to reflect that they've got extra functionality. So this isn't a bit like Sky where they give new customers the best deals and the existing customers suffer. It's not like that at all. It's very equitable, but just to say that there is flexibility depending on which approach you're coming from. And our services are intended to make this as pain-free and as slick as possible. So just to trail, always leave with a trailer of what's coming. Episode 2 next week will be SOLIDWORKS. It will be very similar to what we've done today, albeit focusing around SOLIDWORKS, obviously. Episode 3, as I mentioned, everything to do with project management, change management, issues, viewing. All of those I've just mentioned are all in the absolute core, basic, lowest, cheapest, bottom of the line license. BOM, the BOM editor is actually an add-on, but not a very expensive one. And then episode 4, we're looking at where you can go once you're on the platform. As I mentioned earlier, how can you make use of some of the latest technology? Obviously, things like rendering, real-time rendering, and like studio rendering. The native applications on the 3D Experience platform, what we would possibly call V6, they all use the latest technology for that. So once you're there, once you're in that 3D Experience space, what can you do if the need should arise? So that will be the last, what's currently planned to be the last session. If there's feedback or a will to do anything beyond that, we could always do a special edition, episode 5, but that's what's planned at the moment.